ini. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We will give a couple of minutes to the other people, so please feel free to introduce yourself in your chat box.
Hi.
Hi.
Interprovincial travel.
Ryan, should we start? Or how do you think? We should wait a little bit more, or can we start?
We could wait a couple more minutes.
You think so?
We'll
Okay.
So it's 6:05. Maybe we could start at 6:07.
6:07. Okay. Did everyone has chance to introduce yourself in the chat box?
Where's the chat box?
You can see the bottom side of the screen. There is one icon called chat. So you can communicate with other participants there. You can click the chat icon, then right-hand side, you can see all the conversation going on.
Okay.
So if you want, maybe we can get started and we have a Zoom overview we can share with the visuals. So
Okay.
that sound good?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the Navigating Crisis today, hosted by Parkdale Safety Committee and Parkdale Women's Leadership Group. And the guest speaker is Naty. Can we go next slide? I would like to explain the Zoom overview. First, mute and unmute yourself. You can see icon left bottom side and take yourself on the on and off camera. Take yourself off camera if your Wi-Fi is unstable. In the participant tab, you can raise and lower your hand. You can also rename yourself, which is very helpful during group session. In the chat box tab, you can post comments and questions that we will raise during the discussion. We will also post links here as well. Thank you. Next. There is a language interpretation today. In your meeting controls, click interpretation mark. Click the language that you would like to hear. Today we have Tibetan interpreter. 3 optional to hear the interpreted language only. Click mute original audio. Thank you. Next. Language land acknowledgement, Toronto. We would like to acknowledge that we are gathering and learning on the territories of Wanda and Petun First Nations, the Seneca and Misaga of the Credit First Nation. This land is subject to the Two Row Wampum Belt Treaty and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty, a peace treaty between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee to agree to share the resources of the land as long as the dish never runs dry. Over time, subsequent indigenous nations, peoples, and settlers have been invited in this treaty in the spirit of peace and respect. As treaty people, we are committed to upholding these values in our organizing. As a mother and an immigrant engaging in climate justice, I started learning how to build solidarity with indigenous communities in the struggles to protect their land and resources. Drawing from lessons from Joss to Claude Tremblay, I have learned that we are all treaty people and have a duty to right relation with the land, water, and our human and non-human relatives. It is critical to learn from the reclaimed wisdom of indigenous communities that have been lost due to colonization, a process that I recognize my part in and I'm committed to fighting. I am always thankful for the generous philosophies that have been shared under very harsh circumstances of this position, and believe that if we practice this with respect and stop any more greed, then the world must be more peaceful and just. Next. Community Agreement Overview. The Parkdale People's Economy is dedicated to creating an equitable, diverse, and inclusive environment for all the members of the neighborhood. A meeting will intentionally build accessible and welcoming space for people of all races, genders, classes, abilities, ages, cultures, religions, and sexualities. We will not tolerate harassment of any form, including but not limited to racism, classism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, or any other oppressive language and behavior. If you witness or experience harassment, please inform a member of the organizing team. That is marked by a star next to the name. And we will also be offering a breakout peer support space with an active listener. I'll pass it on to Ana Teresa.
Hi, everyone. You can call me Teresa. I'm here. I'm going to be acting as the active listener. And what we're going to be doing, if anyone in the meeting would like to take space away from the group to process any ideas or any strong emotions, what you could do is actually private message me. So you can go to the participants tab and hit my name, Teresa. And then what I will do is we'll open up a separate space, and then we can go there and just talk things through. And it will really be a space that we can take away from the group just to process any strong emotions. So please do let me know. You can also just request it in the chat box. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Teresa. Next slide, community agreement guidelines. One diva, one mic. Make space, take space. Oops, ouch. This means a participant who may be uncomfortable by something said can say ouch. To indicate they feel uncomfortable about what was just said. Oops allows a person who made the statement to apologize. Be mindful of time. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Awareness of power and privilege. Patience and respect. And please note, this session will be recorded. Thank you. Agenda.
We can pass this on to Bearland.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bearland Mark, and I'm one of the the co-hosts tonight. Sorry. So I'm gonna read the agenda. On the agenda, we're gonna do the welcome and the overview Zoom, which we did already, and we're gonna do the overview of the Parkdale Community Safety Workshops, learning session, navigating crisis, questions and answers, and next steps.
Thank you, William.
Welcome.
Oh, no. Sorry. You go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So now we're gonna say who we are and why we do what we do, and we're gonna talk about what we'll be offering. Thank you.
Thank you. I will introduce briefly about the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group. The Parkdale Women's Leadership Group is a collective of racialized women from Parkdale who are bound together to take action for human rights and justice. We are brought together through the Parkdale Leadership Training Series to organize in our community. We created harm reduction zines and peer support space called the Parkdale Wellness Drop-In. We aim to enlighten people's minds through education and empowerment. Together, we are building the tools, resources, and strategies to empower people's minds, address trauma in our community, and start the process of healing. I'll pass it on, Berian. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna tell everyone about Mutual Aid Parkdale. Mutual Aid Parkdale is a neighborhood group organized on the core principle of practicing solidarity in times of crisis. In responding to the pandemic, we have been safely reaching out to hundreds of our neighbors and checking in on them to see what material and social support they need. We are building trust, care, and commitment with zero judgment. The Community Safety Committee formed in response to acts of harassment in our neighborhood and growing calls to build alternatives to policing. We discuss ideas for how community members can keep each other safe, such as walk safe programs, rapid response teams, defending tenants during displacement or evictions, and other strategies to activate safer space throughout Parkdale. So now I'm going to inform everyone of why we decided to do these workshops. With the second wave of COVID-19 and sustained movements for racial justice and defunding the police, we have been hearing growing calls from community members to scale up and offer new forms of care and support in moments of crisis that do not rely on the police. Throughout February and March, we have been organizing a series of workshops to build our skills in moments of crisis. We'll be offering the following trainings with local facilitators to build community solidarity and learning, such as navigating crisis, mental health and wellness, harm reduction, suicide prevention, conflict resolution, peer support, self-defense, transformative justice, and community healing. And today we are really excited to be joined by Naty Tremblay, who will be offering us a workshop on navigating crisis. This interactive workshop will build upon knowledge and strategies for harm reduction, self-awareness, healthy boundaries, caring communication, and community resilience. We will also explore important considerations and practices for people negotiating a crisis before, during, and after a crisis event within the community. And now I'll pass it on to Naty. Take it away, Naty.
I love it. Hi, everybody. Bonjour, Sago. Good evening. Bonsoir. Wow. Okay, so it's 6:17. I just want to start out. So I want to say thanks for that beautiful land acknowledgement, and for those community agreements. That's great. You saved me a little bit of time. I'm gonna just open up this here. Okay, now if I can remember all this sharing components here, I'm gonna pull up my slides. And while I do that, I'll multitask and tell you a bit about myself. So my name is Naty Tremblay. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as a gender fabulous, two-spirit, and trans person. I'm from a muskrat french-metis community called Pointe-aux-Roches in southwestern Ontario. Here we go, sharing the screen. And is that the one I want? Here we go now. Okay, can you all see? You can see some things. Okay, great. And then I'll do this in the present mode. Woo! Okay. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that works out. And slide 4, ahead of my game. Here we go. I work for Rittenhouse. I'll say, so I've been doing community engaged arts and education for 20 plus years. I am deeply invested in grassroots community organizing for social and ecological justice, and I'm pretty much inclined to use whatever strategies will do that in a meaningful way with community, and in especially low-income communities, folks that have been particularly targeted by criminalization, LGBTQ, two-spirit communities. And so I currently work at Rittenhouse. I'm the ED, whatever that means. It's a fabulous, tiny abolitionist organization that's been around since the early 90s, and specifically doing transformative and restorative justice training, capacity building with low-income and criminalized communities. So just a little shout out to Rittenhouse. I'm gonna let you know I'm silly. I also use sound effects, and I'm passionate. So sometimes I speak quickly, but I'm gonna make really conscious effort to go slow and make sure that our translator has lots of time. So the goals of this workshop, it's been shared a little bit in the description, but I will say what's super important to me is that you are getting an opportunity, each of you individually and as a community, to reflect on your personal gifts, skills, magic, medicines, and your limitations for this work, crisis navigation, and without guilt, because guilt just gets in the way of seeing opportunities to grow and also like celebrating what's there. Okay. For sure, we're working with frameworks of harm reduction and healthy boundaries. Super important. So important. Couldn't emphasize enough. And with a big emphasis on self-awareness, deep listening, and compassionate communications as like some skills you might get to practice. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens tonight. And I mean, y'all already have amazing networks of mutual aid. You've got such amazing organizing happening in Parkdale. So this is just an opportunity to maybe shine light on what's already there and to shine light on some areas where you can grow. That's my impression. We might get to explore some case studies together. Hard to say for sure, perhaps in the question and answer period. And we for sure will explore the pros and cons of contacting emergency personnel, and that is 911, the ambulance services, the police, ... all of these things. Pros and cons. Okay, everybody with me? There's already been a beautiful land acknowledgement. I do want to say, in terms of what I would add to the agreement, the dish with one spoon covenant is like, it's a big teaching on how to be with each other in a good way through regenerative reciprocity, I would say. And I feel like it's really good for this kind of work, crisis navigation. So there's kind of like, if we were really going to distill it, 3 core principles of the dish with one spoon covenant. So the first one is that you have a right to get what you need, and you should get what you need, which also means you have a right to know and dig into what you need. It's a good thing. Okay. 2, you have a responsibility for others to get what they need, which means you're checking in, means developing your capacity to listen and communicate. Oh, good stuff. And then the third, you also have a responsibility to care for and replenish all of our shared resources. And that, is these territories, the waters, the lands, and all the goodness that's here. And I invite us to do that tonight. And I think everything else has been spoken to, but I will say, you've seen all the care that the organizers have put into accommodating different kinds of access needs. And I also would just reiterate my deep commitment to accessing accommodation needs. So let us know, put it in the chat, or you could just put a hand up if there's anything you want to ask for specifically that would help you access this workshop as best as possible. We'll do what we can. We're not going to do a full spoken check-in because that could take forever. Alas, it could be our whole workshop and it would be juicy, but there's more to touch in. So if you're inclined to share, and maybe you already have done that in the chat, your name, the pronouns that you're rocking, she, her, he, him, they, them. Perhaps you're working with pronouns that are outside of the English repertoire or the romantic languages that use all the binaries. Maybe your language base actually has non-gender specific pronouns, right? Let's bring them back, decolonizing pronouns. And if you want to share one thing you're hoping to gain from the workshop, I'd love to hear about that, and I'll do my best to accommodate. If you'd like to add that in the chat, that would be awesome. No pressure. Okay. We're digging in, y'all. You ready? Okay. So actually, before we go further, I do want to say 2 things. I want to really shout out and acknowledge the lineages of crisis navigation, conflict negotiation, and transformative justice, which is to say forms of justice that don't rely on punishment, banishment, incarcerating people, that they rely more on strategies of mutual care and aid to transform behaviors that are harmful, to transform the roots of harmful behavior in individuals, groups of people, etc. I want to acknowledge the lineage of indigenous peoples that have been cultivating that work for a long, long time. I want to acknowledge the work of Black and racialized women across the world, and especially North America, have been doing that work for a long time. Oh my goodness. I really want to acknowledge the disability justice movement, who's been, I think, really germinating those seeds of collective care and sharing that out a lot in this year of pandemic crisis. Yep. And I want to shout out grandmothers who've been doing this work quietly and loudly in kitchens and in backyards. I want to say since time immemorial, but for a good long time. Shout out to them. And I also want to just acknowledge that we're talking about crisis. We will talk about violence to varying degrees. We will talk about emotional awareness about those kinds of things. We're going to touch on triggers. And so I recognize that that's complicated. It's complex. If at any point in time you need to tap out, I encourage you to do that. But if you can stay with us and leverage the resource of Teresa, the active listener, awesome, because that's, it means you're still with us in the circle. But do what you got to do. Okay, here we go now. What is a crisis? Okay, so really, there's many ways that we could define it. This is, I think, the most simplified description. It's an event or a period that may lead to unstable, unsafe, or dangerous situations that affect an individual, a group, a community, or a society. It's an emergency, which really is a very broad definition. It can include a lot of things. I would argue that we are currently in a political, economic, and social crisis of grand proportion across the globe. Right? So we could spend time unpacking that and how that might surface in all kinds of personal and interpersonal crisis in our streets and in our neighborhoods. A personal crisis occurs when an individual can no longer cope. I like this definition because I think it's recognizing that there's something going on, that a person is having a hard time managing. It's not putting the responsibility on them. It's recognizing that everyone has a limit to their capacity to cope with stress, with violence, with anxiety, trauma. So it occurs when an individual can no longer cope with a situation. This might be due to mental or emotional distress or disequilibrium, trauma. It could be a reaction to drugs, could be a reaction to conflict or violence, and among many other reasons why someone might be in a personal crisis. If you have pieces of paper with you and writing utensils, I'm gonna offer prompts and questions throughout, and opportunities to kind of do some reflecting. And so I encourage you to do that. Okay. So here we go. What do we mean by crisis navigation? So I tend to find that when we use the language of crisis de-escalation, that it means like people have in their mind like, oh, okay, I have to just like close it down. I have to quiet it down. I have to shut it down. And sometimes that is appropriate, but sometimes it's really not. And it gives the wrong impression, I think. And then I think also crisis intervention can give the impression that you're gonna jump in there and just pull people apart or just grab someone. You're gonna intervene. They're both words that, I think are very loaded. Whereas, and they definitely reflect a kind of a history of addressing conflict and crisis. But we're going for navigation because I think of it as a way of being with crisis rather than trying to control it. So for me, crisis navigation looks like reducing harm, for sure. That's a primary goal. Doesn't mean you can prevent or stop it all, but doing what you can to reduce harm and reducing risks for people in crisis and those impacted, wherever possible. Supporting a person in crisis to communicate their concerns, supporting them to access basic needs, supporting them to negotiate around conflicts, real or perceived, supporting them to establish a safety plan, and or finding some grounding. And we'll spend some time talking about grounding. But we could say that that they feel a presence in the moment. We'll come back to that. Honoring our personal capacities and boundaries, I think, is a part of crisis navigation. So crisis navigation can never only be about what you're doing externally from yourself. It also has to simultaneously be about honoring your own personal capacities, boundaries, your emotional limitations, triggers, all of these kinds of things. Being in tune with that. And then lastly, finding ways to address crisis in our communities while reducing the negative impacts. Oh, my image cut out the text. I'm so sorry. Design faux pas. The negative impacts of involving the police or emergency services is what it would continue to say. So wherever possible, I think crisis navigation is about trying to reduce the added layer of crisis that comes from involving emergency services, and in particular police, but not exclusively. Okay, moving right along. Part one. Here we go, my friends. And again, let me know if I'm going too fast. Knowing yourself. Okay, this is so step one. Okay, some of your greatest assets in crisis navigation work is your wellness and your self-awareness. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Recipes for Self-Love on Instagram, which just has like an unending stream of beautiful illustrations that are all about uplifting concepts of self-care and self-love. I'm about it. You will see a few of these images shining in this particular presentation. So some questions, and this is coming back to the concept of grounding. So one question I have for you, and I think it's critically important that we know this about ourselves at any given time. How do you know when you are present? Which is to say, you recognize where you are, you're taking in the sensory information around you, you are actively able to make conscious decisions, you're not shut down, you're not triggered, you're able to engage with your mind, your heart, your physical body. These might be some ways that you might identify that you're present. I invite you to actually take some time and journal about the ways that you know that you're present. How do you know when you are present? I like to think like everyone has at least one thing that just like really brings them into presence. Like for me, babies, totally. I could be very stressed out and a baby shows up and I'm with that baby and I feel all the feelings. I'm in that moment. That's an example, I think. Beyond that, what helps you on a daily basis to find grounding? And again, that grounding is just like, okay, my feet are on the ground, literally. I am held by the earth here. And I often actually will do a little meditation that is just like, okay, I'm taking a breath. I feel my feet on the earth. I know that this earth, these territories are very generous. They're very supportive. They're very abundant. They have been so for, since time immemorial. And I'm a part of that web. And that gives me a lot of grounding. And I would say that this piece around daily practice of tapping into what allows you to feel grounded, daily practice of noticing how emotions show up in your body, daily practice of recognizing what kinds of things bring you out of presence is going to be your most useful tool for crisis navigation. Most useful tool. I feel because we don't have tons of time, I'm not going to do this exercise with everyone, but I will say later today, if you feel inclined, it can be really useful to just take a moment to reflect on a small thing that's bringing you stress in your life, a very small thing. So not something that's big that you're like, this is insurmountable. It's an enormous conflict. Just a little thing like, why isn't my sibling answering my text messages? Little thing. And then just notice what emotions show up and where they show up. That's the piece. It's just noticing what emotions show up and where they show up in your body. And it seems like a little thing, but the more you do it, the more you build a kind of an awareness of emotion in your body and how that affects you. So for some folks, actually, your sibling not responding to your texts might bring up a lot of emotion, tons of emotion. Really great to notice that. Does it send you into a spiral of, self-critique? And does that self-critique kind of bring you out of the present moment? Bring you out of all of your wonderful magic in medicine? Ooh. So that's a daily practice that I really invite everyone to step into. And it is totally part of this, like activism is practicing mindfulness and digging into emotional awareness. It really is. Okay. Everyone with me? I'm moving on to the next slide. Oh, okay. So this is on this tip. And I just wanted to like really just give a couple visuals because this is both useful for you and it's also critically useful for working with someone who's in crisis. If you can have a conversation with people. And also, if you're dealing with crisis within your family or within your community or with someone that you know, knowing what sends someone outside of their window of tolerance is critical. It's super helpful. Okay. So this is one of my favorite images of the window of tolerance, my friends. So this is definitely comes from mental health and psychology background, but also I would say it's in the mindfulness realms of understanding when we're grounded or present. So this rectangle, this blue rectangle in the middle of the screen is the window of tolerance. I am seeing it also as very much a river or a body of water. So when you're in that window of tolerance, you're grounded, you're cool as a cucumber, you're like this unicorn raft or a sailboat or whatever beautiful ship you are. And you're just flowing along, and the waves and the winds, they might push you in different directions, but you can handle it. You're flowing with the ebb and flow. You're moving with it. However, when you're outside of your window of tolerance, perhaps a gust of wind that just out of nowhere, and that could be that sibling that hasn't responded to your text in 3 months, or it could be, I know I use that to be humorous, but it could be that you witness something really troubling, or violence, or a host of things that throw you outside of your window of tolerance. And again, this is reflecting times when you're like, oh, I actually am shutting down. So hypoarousal, when you're out, you know, I don't even want to hierarchize it like up or down, but hypoarousal is a fancy word, I would say, to describe the freeze response, or kind of shutting down, or going into a defense mode, or you kind of are locked into just your mind, or you're in a cycle of thoughts. It's very hard to express outward. Lack of energy, lack of affect, these kinds of things. Often we don't even realize that we've been shifted outside of our window of tolerance, because especially if you've developed kind of coping mechanisms since you were very young as a response to criticism, or a host of things that might lock you down. Conversely, you might also find that there are things that really get you activated, and brings a lot of energy, might lead you to want to flee a situation. It might lead you to want to put up a fight and use your fighting words. A host of things, again, that are outside of your window of tolerance. The reason why it's really relevant to be able to identify those things in yourself and in others, because one could argue that in either of those states outside of your window of tolerance, your ability to negotiate is drastically limited. And your ability to negotiate is a critical skill in crisis navigation. Your ability to make different decisions, critical. Your ability to have like access to all of your senses, or as many as possible, critical. So I'm just going to move from this beautiful image of the unicorn raft. And again, this is another potential prompt if you're into drawing and doodling and journaling, that you could create a little image of a body of water and your unique navigating vessel. And what are the things that blow you off your path? Good to know. Without guilt, what are the things that blow you off your path? Okay. One other way of seeing it, this is, I think a lot of people have heard this language, and in particular, this is relevant to trauma. Okay. So previously I wasn't speaking necessarily about trauma. I was speaking about things that maybe spark a reaction from you. Trauma, I would say, is a whole other thing. We can't go super deep into it, but it is super critical to respect, care for when triggers from trauma show up. It's super important. And again, that might prompt a fight response, a flight response, a freeze response, or some will say face, which is that you just dig into it. I want to say that none of these are right or wrong responses, because they're responses that you've developed to protect yourself. However, if in a situation where you're de-escalating a crisis and something happens that triggers you in your response, leads you into a position where you have less control, or you freeze, it could put you in a risky situation. So it's just super important to know, to be in tune with our triggers, to be in tune with, be able to decipher from, oh, I'm feeling unsafe, I feel uncomfortable, I feel triggered, and to respect all of that information. Respect all of that information and to work with it. Okay? Groovy. And again, that's totally a place where you can do some work. I planned in here a 5-minute break. Does anyone feel like that is necessary right now, or can we just like keep on going? You can put a thumbs up in the reactions box, which is like down in the bottom. If you're like, oh yeah, I need a break. Not seeing any thumbs up. Cool. I'm just gonna open the view so I can see more people. I guess organizers, let me know if you see. Yeah, okay, There's one thumbs up. There is another break planned. Okay, I'm going to continue, my friends. And having said that, oh my goodness, I celebrate you taking bio breaks anytime you need, and I won't be offended. Okay, just you can shut your video camera off and take care of yourself. Okay, moving right along, my friends. So we're getting into a crisis that surfaces. Risk assessments and harm reduction. This is the first phase of crisis navigation. So I'm using the example of out in the street. I think that a lot of these ideas would still apply if you're inside a building, in your apartment building, in an agency that you frequent, etc. First thing to do, quick glance around you. And I'm like, literally, the quicker you can collect as much information as possible, the better. And so again, being grounded and attuned is really going to help you. So first thing, scan the environment. Is there traffic? Are you near a busy street? Are there many people or no people around? Are there dangerous objects? And I say dangerous, and I want to put heavy quotation marks around that because that can be loaded. What can that mean? How do you know whether something's going to be dangerous or not? It could be assuming that a person is in a position to use a weapon, but it's good to have a sense of what's around you. That I would say for sure, what could potentially be a dangerous object. When you're scanning for people around, y'all have the advantage of being in Parkdale, which is so beautifully organized. When you do a scan of the street, do you see potential allies? Do you see, oh, there's that outreach worker from Parkdale Queen West Community Health Center. Oh, there's that coordinator from Park. Okay, sweet. Yeah, I know that person. Oh, there's that person at that restaurant that I love. We totally had a chat about community safety, and I know that they got my back. I know that we are aligned in our politics or beliefs that we don't want to call in the police. Or, oh, that's my neighbor. We have great chats and backyard barbecues. Yeah, that person I think I could trust. Awesome. Similarly, doing a quick scan, are there potential agitators? And agitators are really just being, you know, is there someone who you can visibly see is actually agitating that person in crisis, that is contributing to the crisis? Are there people around that are watching but not necessarily supporting? Are there NIMBYs? Which is to say, you know, people who are like new to your neighborhood and who have a particular, you know, perspective on what the neighborhood should look like, and a lot of bias, judgment, racism, homophobia, etc., about what is dangerous and who might call the police, whether or not they recognize that you're doing something. If you have that information about people, that can be helpful. Or similarly, if you've been in conversation with social service workers or social workers or business owners who you're like, okay, I understand we're not on the same page. Noted. It's cool. We'll get there. That's the allies and agitators. Always important to recognize entrances and exits. Seriously, if you're in the Milky Way, for example, are you in a part of the Milky Way where you're like, you're really in a tunnel? Or if you're in Mazara County, well, there's infinite entrances and exits. Fabulous, except there's a fence. There's many fences, actually, as an example. And that seems like a small thing, but it could be critical for you. And it's also really important for someone in crisis to always feel like they can leave, they can move, that they aren't trapped. We'll get more into that. Are you close to a police precinct or in a heavily policed area? Also critical. Even if you aren't seeing them, they might roll in at any point in time. Good to know. And lastly, are there potential resources around you, like a tree or a park, a garden, a water fountain? Are you near a community agency that provides food services or a food bank? Are you close to a restaurant or cafe that would hook you up with a tea? All super useful. If you can do that in a quick scan of the environment, boom. If you already know your neighborhood and all those resources, woo, you're doing good already. You're doing good already. You might notice I'm going to keep like basically encouraging mutual aid, mapping. We'll get to it later. And you're already on it. So it's just, this is just one other reason that you're doing great work. Keep it up. Okay. And I just want to give a shout out to myself for my beautiful illustration of the Parkdale Library right there and the big old fox. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Next slide. Still on the tip of risk assessment and harm reduction. Checking my time. Okay. After you do a quick glance of the environment, as important, equally important, a quick glance within you. And this is again why all that preliminary work, daily work, just checking in with yourself, having a whole host of strategies that help you get grounded. Are you up for this? With that quick glance, are you up for this? Do you feel resourced? Which is to say, have you eaten? Have you slept well enough? Have you been like super taxed with stress and anxiety, etc.? Do you have a water bottle with you? Anything that helps you feel resourced. Do you have smudge, if that's a tool that you use, etc.? Do you have those things? When you take a scan of the environment and then you check in with yourself, do you feel there is a risk of being triggered or re-traumatized by engaging with this particular crisis? Taking note, no shame. Critical. Could your identity put you at risk in this situation? It's a tricky one. It's hard to assess. And that answering that question is going to be loaded with assumptions, potentially biases. Unless you know the person or unless you have a relationship already, unless you've engaged already. But it is really important. Like if you are a small person, I would say if you're a gender nonconforming person, I would say if you're a woman, these are all potential reasons why if you're on your own, you might not want to step in. I would also say that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't step in. I just acknowledge that. Are you able to call on others for support in this particular situation, for backup, or even to take over for you? So that is both, do you already have a text thread, a Facebook group that's like a mutual aid or street safety crew that you could just like send the coordinates where you are, something is hot. Anyone who can come, that would be great. Even just the coordinates. Are there people around already, if you've scanned, that you can tap in? You feel like if things got heated, that, yeah, there's that local business a block down that you could go to, etc. Super important. And then also, do you have any assumptions, judgments, or biases showing up that could impact your ability to be supportive? Of course, I know everyone on this call is actively engaged in the work of understanding anti-oppression, intersectionality, systems of power. And because we've all been raised up in this world, it's all in us. And so, like I could say that in working for many years at Sketch, working arts, we work with street involved young people doing arts-based programmings, that at least in the early throes, I had some really deep, complicated bias working with straight white men, because I had experienced a lot of violence from them and a lot of homophobia. And it meant that I wasn't able to provide the kind of compassion that I wanted to. I recognized that, and I worked on it over time. And I'd like to believe that I can push through that, but not everyone has to. All that to say, it's okay if you're like, no, I don't think I can work around that. Not right now. That's not my priority. Okay, just being real and honest. Okay, cool. And again, a shout out to Recipes for Self-Love. I totally messed up I just gonna say that English is not my first language, and that's my reason for spelling mistakes, but it could just be that I was hasty. Okay. Being with a person in crisis. Checking the time, 6:49, everybody. Woo-wee. I think we're aiming to do question and answer at 6:15. That's what I saw in the proposed outline. I think we might get there. So I've written up here a transformative justice framework of inquiry. So you've done a scan of the environment. You've done a scan with yourself. You're like, okay, the variables are working for me. I think I can step in. I feel ready to step in. I feel resourced to step in. I got this. I see that there are people I can call in. Here I go. I propose that you start with a transformative justice framework of inquiry, which is really meeting a person with compassion, understanding that harmful behaviors come from a whole host of different things, systems of oppression that have raised us up, experiences of violence that have raised us up, etc., mental illness, and lack of access to really meaningful resources, ... All of you know this. Transformative justice, to me, is about getting at what is the harm that's been caused. what could support you in this moment? What could support you in a deeper way beyond this moment? What are the supports available? And let's get also at the deeper roots of this crisis, the deeper roots of harm you've experienced, the deeper roots. And y'all can do that because this is work that you're doing in your community. So if I were to approach someone in crisis, I would approach slowly, gently, with a calm, clear, compassionate voice, and just ask them how they're doing. Ask them what their name is, basic information, and then ask, what has happened? It seems like you're in trouble, or it seems like you're upset, or it seems like, without making any assumptions or judgments, just, I was wondering if you would want to talk. I was wondering if there's anything that could help you right now. The basic questions: what has happened? If they share that, what have you been thinking about? What have you been feeling since that happened? What are you feeling right now? And all of this, of course, is to understand them and also to collect some information. And I'll get deeper into that, but it's super important that you're able to understand, is the person in real risk, in real danger right now? Is it perceived? Are there other people that are in danger, at risk? All of these things are super important to collect, while also remaining calm, being clear, being present, and trying to lean into what might help make things right for you right now. And whatever language works for you to be able to convey to someone, what could help make things better for you right now? What would reassure you? What would help soothe you? What would help you communicate more to me what you're experiencing? So asking open-ended questions. What could help? And also asking, are there other people that you trust? Are there other people that provide support for you? Or are there other people who are part of your family that you trust? And always, I think it's really important to say people that you trust. So that's the entry point of
Naty, so sorry. We accidentally unmuted you for 1 second as we were admitting someone. So just gonna get you to unmute. Sorry about that.
No worries. That's great.
Error.
What was the last thing that I said? I'll just pick up with
It was only about
that's
20
kind of the
seconds.
entry point.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Romy. So that's your entry point. Opening with care, compassion, making direct eye contact if that feels appropriate, if that person is responsive, getting close but not too close, never touching, but being with. And so I underlined the word with the person rather than, you're trying to control the situation, you're with them. So whatever ways you can communicate that to a person, I'm here with you. I can just sit here and listen. If you just need to cry, I'm just here with you. If when you're ready, I can get you things like water or food, and really lean into what are those basic needs that I can help you with. Explain your intentions, reiterate your intentions. I want to help reduce harm for you. I want to help reduce harm for folks around. Like I said, gently collecting information. If you can get a person's name, contact information, perhaps they'd share where they live. If those are points of connection, possible connection, awesome. You also have to do that carefully, because the person might be, when they're in crisis, really distrustful. Might be like, why are you asking me all these questions? Why do you want this information? And that would be fair. So to say, I'm just, what is your name? Where do you live? I just want to be able to support you in the best way possible. And in case you need me to get in touch with anyone, let me know if there are contact information for them. But also, if anything happens, I'd want you to be able to get in touch with me, or that I could get in touch with you after the fact. Just being super clear and transparent and reiterating, I'm really invested in your care. I'm really invested in reducing harm. And if things seem like it's necessary to say, I want to prevent the need or the case that the police might be called, I say, if it seems necessary, because that can be super triggering for a person. So you have to be super careful when you name that's a risk. But it also is critical to say it if it is true that is a risk. And I'll get more to that. I give some examples of things in terms of language of care that is non-judgmental and that is rooted in a kind of a negotiation, which isn't like, I give you this, you give me that, but more, okay, I hear that this is what you need. I hear that this is something that you want, but it is a little risky, or it's potentially going to bring some danger or risk to you, or it is having some negative impact on this street. What if we got you some water and rest first? And that is, again, that is specifically if someone is actually reaching out, is lashing out, is moving out into traffic, or doing something that's risky. But more often than not, I do just want to say, more often than not, people are not wilding out like that. They're not spiraling out like that. It's more of an internal spiral out. It's often much quieter. And so that is actually where the deep listening is required. Listening for if someone is expressing fears or concerns, needs, wants, risks that they perceive, even if it's not necessarily reality. And just reiterating, I hear that you're afraid. I hear that you're worried that someone is trying to hurt you. I'm here to support you. Again, it's a spelling mistake. I'm hard to support you. Actually, maybe that was intended. I like that a lot. And I sincerely, being self-aware and grounded, and this piece of compassionate communication are more often the primary strategies that you will use. And more often than not, and I can say, at least in my personal experience, that has been incredibly helpful to just get someone grounded. And again, that really can mean that their feet are on the ground, they're able to communicate, they're able to negotiate. That doesn't mean that their state or the whatever led to that crisis has been repaired and transformed. That's where transformative justice follows navigating a crisis. That's the next steps. Okay, here we go. Some things that might help a person find grounding. So you've approached a person, you've gotten their name, you've started a conversation, you understand that they're really agitated, you understand that they are spiraling out, you've been able to convey, I'm here to support you. Are there any things that might help you find grounding? Or insert whatever language is appropriate. Are there other things that might help you feel safer? Are there other things that might help you feel cared for? Feeling heard, feeling control in their life. Getting basic needs met. I've already named that. Sleep is huge. A little nap under a tree or by the Hope Garden. And you are with them. Being in nature, sanctuary spaces. By that I mean the spaces in Parkdale where there's a collective agreement that we can just hold space for someone who is needing to cry or needing to scream. And I want to say that because sometimes it's entirely appropriate to scream. Sometimes it's entirely appropriate to cry madly. And, de-escalating that can actually cause a lot of harm. So unfortunately, we don't have tons of places where you can go and a person can just cry and scream. But I believe that Parkdale actually has been cultivating those spaces. So the one caveat, assuring that a space like an agency, that their policies align with your goals, which is to say that if a person starts swearing, are they going to be thrown out? Or if they say something that's inappropriate, are they going to be barred? Just like knowing those things. And that's, again, an opportunity to develop more alignment with agencies. Because even when they have a mission statement that is like, we are here to serve everyone in the community, especially our most marginalized, they still have these, I would argue, punitive justice strategies. And sometimes they have to because of provincial or municipal law. And that is also complicated. And another place that we can organize. Hey, okay. Being with trusted loved ones. So this is another place where if you know the person and you can call in their auntie, awesome. Or if they say, my auntie, my trusted auntie, awesome. That's a point of connection. Connecting with animals, snuggling. If you have a snuggly dog, tap it in. Anyway, I won't go through all of these things. These slides will be available to y'all. And I know, of course, you probably already have immense lists of things available to you in your community and in Parkdale, but I will point out making a safety plan. And we're not going to dig too much into that, but that can be something where you literally, if you have drawing materials and a marker, literally visually mapping with the person, okay, you're in the middle. Who are like 2 or 3 people that you trust? Who are there around you? Okay, and like later today, what do you need to be able to feel like a little bit safer? Okay, That's step 2. Okay, step 3, like this week, what's going to help you feel more grounded through the week? Okay, mapping it out, using visuals wherever possible, super helpful. And then they have that they can take with them. And it's just reinforcing the idea that we have a right to safety, that I'm with you in this, etc. You've got supports around you, you're not alone. Critical. Okay, next slide. You'll note the skunk. That's an infamous Parkdale skunk from Mazarick Park. So particularly challenging and risky situations. Okay, so before I go there, I do want to name and Reach Out Response Network. They have put out some reports, and I imagine right now in community there's a lot of different feelings about like mental illness, mental health response platforms, using 911, should it be social workers, ... We won't get into the politics, but they have released some reports with data about how often when, for example, someone is in a mental health crisis and community members are called in to support, how immensely infrequent there is any instance of violence. And in fact, and I'm sure you've seen, it's stated across Instagram and all social media platforms, the main people who experience violence when a mental health check is made are people in mental distress, primarily. So with that caveat, one thing that is really important is to check in with yourself. Once again, am I making, or are other people making assumptions about what is dangerous, criminal, or crazy behavior? If someone is walking in their underwear down the street, no shoes, are they dangerous? Or is it just outside of our reality? ... If someone is yelling at the top of their lungs, are they dangerous? Is it threatening? ... Just super relevant, super critical for us to be able to assess that. Just to take a little check-in with ourselves. Okay, having said that, I recognize that loud yelling, drawing attention, the potential to attract police or other less supportive peoples, those all do pose risks for sure. And I'm going to go deeper into particularly challenging and risky situations for sure. If that's happening, you recognize that the risks are high. First and foremost, still from a compassionate place, clear, firm, kind statements like, my friend, your behavior might put you at risk of danger, so let's try and find another strategy. I'm just telling you this strategy is dangerous for you. And it's also dangerous for other people. Let's try a different strategy. It's not saying, no, don't do this. It's just saying, this has risks for you. Or, I want to keep you safe. So can we move to a safer space in the neighborhood to reduce your risks? Again, let's go to that sanctuary space. Let's go to the park. Yell as much as you want. And I actually know there'll be more people there who can support. If you can, tap in people to talk with bystanders. So if one of the risks is that there is a whole group of people around who are filming, they're making comments, you recognize that they might be agitators or are not aligned with your politics, have some of your support people, if they've arrived, or you've already tapped in bystanders, or you've got a crew with you, or just straight up bystanders. Hey, my friend, could you talk to those folks and just let them know we got this under control? We're practicing community strategies for de-escalating crisis. That's what we're up to right now. No need to call the police as of yet. We are on this. Just reassuring people we got a process in place. And it also, again, just reinforces to anyone in the neighborhood, this is what we're about, okay? And then redirection is super helpful. It's kind of been hinted at already, but would you like to go for a walk? You want to go to Parkdale Queen West Community Health Center and see if so-and-so is there? Want to go grab a smoke? I don't even smoke, but I have smoked many cigarettes in an effort to just encourage someone into a different direction. Let's just get a smoke. Let's go to the park, have a chat, sit down. Huge. Relating to a person where they're at. Ooh. Okay. How am I doing for time? 7:05. Okay. Yes. Okay. The more complex things. Being with a person in crisis who is expressing, demonstrating, using aggression, threats, or physical violence. That's what's surfacing as a part of their crisis. And I think it's really important to see it that way. It's not that they are an inherently violent or dangerous person, but that it's a characteristic of their crisis. And sometimes it's really real to be angry. I'll just keep saying that. Again, use clear and firm statements like, I really want to support you, but I can't if you're being harmful towards me. And say it as many times as you need to. Those are your boundaries. You need to express it. I really want to support you, but I can't if you're doing this thing. I really can't. I understand you're upset. Perhaps there's another way to express yourself without putting yourself or others at risk. This kind of way of saying, like, I hear you. I actually like fully legit, like it's legit that you're angry. It's legit that you're freaking out, but it's actually putting myself, you, and others at risk. That's not what we want. Often that works. I'm going to say often that works. Always, I think generally in crisis de-escalation, navigation, you want to maintain a buffer space, physical and energetic and even spiritual. Especially if you perceive any aggression, expand that buffer space. Expand that buffer space, the space between you and that person. Can you do that in a way that is like, I'm with you, and I'm also practicing care for myself and for you? Ooh, nuanced skills. Okay. And it always, again, assuring you both have exits. If there are bystanders that are supporting you or that just happen to be around, let them know to back up. Ask them to back up. Tell them to back up. Both for themselves, and also that can like really agitate a situation when there are too many people around. I would argue 2 people in the nucleus of a crisis at most, and other people who are within hearing distance and or seeing distance and or texting distance, all of the above. If they make threats towards you or to anyone else, but in particular to anyone else in this particular piece, just capture it. It's super important to take note of that so that you can follow up with your mutual aid group, your street safety group, your Facebook group. And it's not to call someone out. It's just to say, there's a reason to believe that this person might be in risk. It's not to say, this person is dangerous, everybody watch out, and blast their face. It's just to say, this person might be at risk. Just letting folks know, keep an eye out. If a threat or violence is directed at you, back out carefully. Never try to restrain someone. Never. Don't do it. Even if you're a bodybuilder, don't do it. It could hurt you. It could really hurt that person. It will certainly agitate the situation. Don't do it. Even if you're a security guard. Unless you have training or backup. And even then, just like, and I say that, and like, if someone was going to run out into traffic, I know that my knee-jerk reaction would be to try and restrain them. And probably many people would. Or if someone was going to lunge at someone else, often our knee-jerk reaction is to restrain. At most, put an arm or hand, but don't try and grab them. It is like really taking the whole situation into next level danger. Okay. You probably already know that. And I would just generally say, when you do that environmental scan right at the top of this whole scenario, if you perceive that a person is aggressive, don't go in if you're alone. Don't do it. Just stay nearby. Stay nearby, take information. You're being with a person, but from a distance. Keeping an eye out, witnessing as things happen, reducing people getting close to that person. That's your job if someone is in an aggressive state. Okay? Or these are some suggestions. I can't say that's your job. These are some suggestions that okay. And this is actually, I was referring to this report. It has some data on close to 0% of crisis calls received by civilian-led mobile crisis intervention teams result in injury or harm to frontline workers. They actually provided tons of data on how rarely people are violent that are in distress. I wanted to reiterate that because mentally, folks in mental distress are so easily criminalized. They're so easily criminalized. And that's partly why I keep asking the question, check in with your assumptions about a person. Are they actually a danger to you or anyone else just because they're acting strangely? ... When to step out, my friends. You haven't failed if you aren't able to address this crisis yourself. I'm going to reiterate that a few times, but when to step out, when you're exhausted, when you check in with yourself, which of course you're doing regularly, and you check in with yourself and I'm like, I got no spoons left. I've given it all. I've given it all. I got to tap out. You're triggered and or ungrounded. I have lost access to that big full window of tolerance and all the choices I can make from that place. I've lost it. It's super narrow now. I'm in a defensive mode. That is definitely a time to tap out. It's super dangerous for you and that person in crisis. If you've been hurt, physically hurt for sure, or targeted by violence, definitely time to tap out. No need to be bold and courageous in that time. No. That would be adding to the crisis rather than reducing the harm. If the person in crisis needs professional supports that you can't provide or that are not available in the community at this time, definitely time to tap out. And I would certainly say, and I know y'all are going to touch on harm reduction and mental health first aid. So you'll get deeper into how do you know, like, oh, this person really needs a medic. This person really definitely needs a mental health professional right now. There's not anything I can do to actually help them. That's real. That is real. Of course, as you build your mutual aid webs, your pods of support, and as you know your neighbors and all the rad, badass people in your community, of course, there's going to be people in your community who have those skills. So if you have a text thread, Facebook group, where's that person with that skill? Tap them in. Woo! Thing of beauty. Okay. And once again, remember, you haven't failed if you're not able to address this crisis yourself, which is to say, to bring a person to a grounded place or to bring them to a safer place. So in that case, reach out to others to step in, which is to say, because of course there would be people around you, at least one or two people. My friend, I have to tap out. I'm giving a pass on the notes I've taken or the information I've collected. I'm moving away from the center of supporting and being with. I'm inviting you into it. These are some insights. Here's some water and cookies. Bingo bango. You've done a great job. Try to stay nearby until someone else has come. If you send a message across your thread, if you happen to be by yourself or someone has stepped away for a minute, but keep a safe distance. If you're like, my spoons are gone, I've got no more energy left, step away. You're still with the person, just not right beside them in, direct conversation. If you haven't already done so, take some notes of some of the critical information you collected, the person's name, if you like their auntie's name, people they identified that they trust. They said, oh, I live at King and Jameson. Okay, noted. Who are the people I know in that neighborhood who might be able to form a web of support around them? Note it, pass it on to whoever is picking up. Oh, I'm sorry, going back there. Excuse me. Realities of calling emergency services. Oh, I know we want to avoid this as much as possible. I know we do. But I also want to say, sometimes we have to. The ideal is really being clear with ourselves and with our community about when we will, or when we have to. So to note, more often than not, when you call 911, even if you say, oh my God, so many times I've supported conflict and transformative justice processes where someone says, I called 911 because this person was in a total crisis. I couldn't help. And I said, only bring the paramedics. That's it. Nobody else, please. And of course, almost because they said that, the police were the only people who showed up. And that created immense harm and a lot of conflict. And in communities where folks know, you don't call the police, trouble. That creates immense undulations of conflict. But also, that's what that person felt they had to do. And I note that, a person shouldn't feel guilt if they're like, this is out of my capacity to maintain safety for this person and myself. And I don't have broader resources, but that's the piece. If you know you don't have broader resources, Parkdale's another story, and you're building. That's the wink. Okay. What else to say on this piece? It's also relevant, if you're calling from a neighborhood that's heavily policed, they're going to send the police, and they're not, that's just for real. And just rarely are mental health providers or is the mental health unit ever sent. I know you know all these things, but it's critical just to reiterate it. I also note that sometimes people want you to call emergency services, and you have to respect their agency. Communicate the risks to them, collect information if you can, pass on a community number that they can reach out to. For someone in a mental health crisis, they might feel like the only way I can access just like a week of support where people are going to look after me, I'm going to get food, I'm going to get meds, is to be taken in by the police. And that's messed. It's messed that's how people access care, because ultimately that's what they're looking for. But that is real, and we have to respect their agency. And as it's already been stated, sometimes there's no other option. And in particular, if someone is not able to negotiate, is very aggressive, and is projecting outward violence towards you and other people. So if the police have been called is my last piece, and then we're going on a break, my friends. Or I guess we're going into question and answers. I'm deferring to Mercedes to make that decision. But so if the police are called or are already on site, these are some things that you can do to help. And you're still with that person. First and foremost, let the person know. Do it in a way that tries to reduce crisis for them, but know that it probably will increase crisis for them. Remind them that you're going to stay with them for as long as you can. Let them know that you're going to be witnessing, that you're going to keep an eye on things. Ask them if there's anyone that they want you to communicate with, to let them know what's going on. All of those things can reassure a person. And then when you're around the police, wherever possible, if you can say to them, just want you to know that we're actively working on crisis de-escalation, if that's true. So if, for example, someone else called the police, someone who is watching, a bystander, someone who says, not in my backyard, or the police just happen to be going by, let them know. We in Parkdale, we are trying to take care of ourselves. We keep each other safe, and we have mad skills in crisis de-escalation and navigation. So you could let us do that. You're not needed right now. You're in your right to say that, but also take care of yourself, especially if you have a criminalized identity, body, experience, way of moving through the world, way of communicating. All of those things, super critical. Take down their badge numbers, their names, precincts if you can. All of that stuff is super helpful. Clarify if you can why they're charging a person if they are, why they're arresting a person, if they're taking them away, where they're taking them, all of these things, ... And follow up. So if they said we're taking them to this precinct, if they gave a badge number, or they said this is why we're charging them, don't just leave it at that. Contact the precinct, ask for more information, see if you can actually visit with the person. If they've been taken to a mental health, a hospital, or another space where they're being institutionalized, can you follow up with them there also? Super critical. Can you, between the time that you reach out to them, organize, get in touch with your crew, with your safety team, create a safety plan. Okay, so if this person just got formed, they're going to be institutionalized for the next 72 hours. What are we going to do to support them when they come out? Okay, yeah, they gave me the number of their auntie and their sister. Great, okay, and we know they are in that neighborhood. Cool, we know those folks. Okay, great. They conveyed that actually like part of their crisis is that they haven't had housing. They're underfed. Okay, what can we do to support that? All of these things can be a safety plan that actually was informed by them. Have those things in mind and even prepared in advance, recognizing that that person might be like, I don't want any of that. And that is their right. Respect their agency. Woohoo! Okay, that's the break portion. How's everybody doing? Mercedes, how are we for time?
We're doing great. This is a good moment to pause and just see, yeah, how is everyone feeling right now? Do you need a couple minutes just to breathe, relax, and then come back in? Do we want to just keep moving forward? How are people feeling?
You can
We
put
got
it in
one
the
all
chat.
good. Yeah. I hear, just so everyone knows, once again, lots of people are saying feeling good, all good, continue please.
Sweet.
So we're good to keep going. I heard there is one request just to try out our breakout room, so I'm going to open that up. So, but Naty, take it away from here. Keep going.
Here we go. Okay, and I do intend to still make space for questions and answers. Okay, so the sacred pod mapping Cool. Okay. So you may have noted, I tried to highlight at various points throughout my rambling about the great benefit of having a personal map of your resources, which is to say the things that help you feel grounded, help you get grounded, but also a community map of the resources that you can rely on in event of a crisis. So I generally recommend that everyone makes a map like this for themselves and makes a map for your neighborhood. Boom. And then you know, and share that with your people. So, for example, in this beautiful map, the red dot in the middle that says you is you. I recommend creating your own version and making a really cute self-portrait in the middle. And then you want to have at least 3, if not 6 or more, circles that are right around you. And that is your close and most trusted people. That's your like core pod. And I sincerely, this is like critical transformative justice practice that we should start yesterday. Everyone should have a pod, not just because of pandemic times and it's whose homes we can go into, but that we know, okay, these are the 5 people that if I'm in a crisis, I can just reach out to Erica P in my pod, and she knows to reach out to the 5 other people in my pod, and they will organize a video chat, a park walk, or whatever, and we'll get in touch with each other. And you know that they will organize space around you. And of course, because you have already shared, you're my podio. I know you got me and I got you. So of course you would talk about what are the strategies that support you when you're in crisis. Maybe you will collectively be a pod together and you just rotate who's in the middle as needed. What a thing of beauty. Once you've got that, you and hopefully and probably everyone already has that circle of your most trusted people around you. And then you want to imagine, maybe like 10, let's be generous. Let's think abundance, 10 people who are movable, which is to say like, yeah, they're like your kin. You could have more trust. You could be more vulnerable with each other. They have some skills. They could benefit from your skills. Okay, you want to map them down to folks that are kind of in an outer periphery. You could tap them in an emergency. And you're also noticing what could I do to develop our relationship even further, to have a little bit more trust, or at the very least relay, you know what, you have a car, and if shit hits the fan, you're going to be the person I call to show up and drive all that food down to wherever it's needed. Okay. And then you're going to have a couple big circles, and you want to you want to map the agencies, those community serving agencies that have politics and policies that align with your goals, who have services that are intended for you and your people. Those can be really great, but it's super critical to know who are the staff that are actually aligned. Because again, I've been in the not-for-profit world for a good long time, and sometimes it's just a handful of staff who are like really invested in the politics of community safety. So it's key to know who those folks are. Also, it's key to know who in those agencies get things done. You probably already know that, so that's great. But put their names. If you're like, okay, Parkdale Queen West Community Health Center, Parkdale Library, who are the point people in those spaces? Like, map it down. Businesses, local business, mom and pop shops, those folks you've been visiting from time that you always say hello to. On a street, when things blow up, it's critical that you know that restaurant, that cafe, that shop, that they also will back you up, or that you could run in there if you needed a safe place to be, or that you could take a person in that needs just like 20 minutes of a safe place to be. Map those, add those folks as well on your map. Woohoo! And then resources, that's like parks. That's like, where can I find free water? Where can I get food, etc. ... Where can I find a dog park with lots of squishy puppies? ... Okay. And then share that with your people. Okay. Share with your people. Look at it and be like, okay, where are there some gaps? Do we have anyone in this list that has some mad mental health, first aid, training, and skills? Do we have anyone in this list who has legal knowledge? Do we have anyone in this list who knows how to tourniquet somebody when they're bleeding a lot? Critical skills. Okay. and always seeing a gap as an opportunity to grow. Because y'all are organizers, you know, that's like where motivation and passion surfaces. Woohoo! There's an opportunity. Here we go. We're going to create a street medic team. Okay. Okay. So obviously tonight, before you go to bed, you're all scintillated by this idea. You're going to create a pod map, and tomorrow you're going to share it with your friends, right? Sweet. And then I'm thinking like Parkdale Women's Leadership Group. Y'all could have as a group, you're the you. Parkdale Leadership Women's Group in the middle. Who's your pod? ... And sharing that. I love it, right? Okay. One beautiful thing we can do right now. So in this phase of the workshop, I was going to propose that we could explore some case studies, and y'all could ask some questions based on things that have already shown up in your neighborhood, in your community, and we could strategize together. We could skills share together. That could be useful, or we could just put the case studies away, and we can just open the floor for general questions, whatever is useful to y'all. 7:26.
Naty, maybe I can jump in just to see if maybe just as a first priority, if anyone either from Mutual Aid Parkdale or from the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group might have any specific scenarios or just specific questions that immediately come to mind. And then for the wider group joining us tonight, if you have questions, just indicate it in the chat and then we can kind of go through it that way too.
Love it. I'm behind on the messages. I'm sorry. 67 new messages.
It's just a lot of closed captioning edits.
Oh, that's great.
I'm curious, maybe Berylan, I know you had at least one example of a scenario from the Mutual Aid Parkdale organizing. Did you want to share an example?
Sure. One day we had an activity. We were doing an activity downstairs at the Parkdale Library, and one of the women in our group, for some reason, she would avoid, or procrastinate on, performing certain tasks with the cleanup process or the setting up process. So I just reached out to her and I said, you know what, hey, all of us are getting the same honorarium. Hey, we need to all participate in the process of cleanup. And she lost it. I don't know what I said, but I think she said it was in the manner I said it. And, I was a bit taken aback because no one else heard what I told her. Nobody knew until she, started yelling, and of course, it get out of hand. She was yelling, I yelling. Other women were holding me, other people were holding her, and then the security came down, and then the head of the library came down, and other staff came, and so it's like, So I was just thinking, what do you think I could have done in that situation, Naty?
Thanks for sharing that. Yep, that's a good example.
I'd like to ask Berylan a question. Because Berylan and I, we know each other.
Of course.
And Berylan, you know that I do not know you to be a confrontational or problematic person. And so it's really unfortunate that you went through that. And I can see you taking that person aside so as not to embarrass them in front of the whole group. Mm-hmm. But I just want to ask you one question, my love. In terms of conflict mediation, one of the things that I remember being in the training is that you speak to the behavior and not the person. And I just want you to go back and think about it, and because the way you said it was speaking to the activity that the whole group does and needed to do, and that you wanted her to partake in it. But I'm thinking, is there another way, if you were just speaking to the behavior or the group, if you could think of another way that you could have spoken to her And this isn't a criticism.
Yeah,
I'm just
sure.
thinking, I'm thinking of ways that, because I've gone through that too with people, and it's gotten out of hand. So I can relate. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Opal.
Beryl, did you want to share any?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
In my mind, I'm thinking, you know what, I went to you and, you know, nobody has heard. So it couldn't have been, degrading or, or belittling her or, and I explained to her, I just think, it was just a habit. So, and it wasn't just me that, observed that, all of us observed she were doing the same thing time and time again. And, so I guess she probably just wasn't interested in participating and helping with the cleanup process. So, and lo and behold, I happen to be the one that opened my mouth and, and explained to her, listen, we're all getting the same amount, hey, we need help. You need to, So she thought I said it to her, in a demeaning manner. So
Is it okay if I pick up?
Please do.
Yeah, okay. I want to say thanks for your deep self-reflection and humility also in thinking back about that time. The things that kind of immediately come up, and I do think this is we're getting into conflict negotiation and navigation, which is awesome because these things often overlap or they're very intrinsically woven together. I think that often we can't know what sparks a strong reaction from a person, even with our most careful words, actually, sometimes by saying, I need you to do something, or it would be great if you helped clean. For a host of reasons, a person might hear, you're saying I'm a bad person. You're saying I don't care about the group. You're saying I'm not trying hard enough. You're saying this. And I think of this, the image and the metaphor of an iceberg underwater, that often, there's just a little tip above the water, and we don't see all that big iceberg under the water. That when we bump into it, we're like, what's going on? Why is this strong reaction to just asking to clean? But it could be that that person has experienced a lot of shaming in her life, a lot of critique in her life. That may have happened when she was really young, and she doesn't even realize that what sounds like a critique sends her out of her window of tolerance, where all of a sudden she goes into fight or flight or freeze mode. And she hasn't, for a host of reasons, maybe isn't necessarily aware of that, or maybe feels like I don't deserve to be criticized. And it can be really hard to, level to a place where you can talk with the person to get at, I'm so sorry for, sparking upset for you. And maybe we can clarify what we mean, what our intentions are, which is the ideal in conflict negotiation. It generally takes at least one person who can be like, okay, because I can understand also if you're like, this is a group initiative, we collectively have a value of support and working together, that it should be no big deal to invite you to help us clean. It's actually in our agreements. We're all getting paid for it. But again, for a host of reasons, that could be a trigger for a person. So if you have the capacity, you notice, oh, I'm upset now because I'm sharing something that feels reasonable, and you're responding in this way, you're getting angry. Wherever you have the capacity to be like, oh, now I'm going out of my window also. Oh, okay, I'm going to bring it back in. How can I try to negotiate with this person? Which is to say, I really want to understand why you're upset. I also really want you to understand me. Can we sit down together? Or maybe we should come back to this in a day. Or maybe we can come back with the whole group and we can just talk through what are our agreements, what are our understandings of how we hold this space together in a good way, because you're super valuable here, you're needed here, and also we all gotta carry our own weight. That sounds really nice and easy, but easier said than done. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
It does, and does make sense. But the good news is, after that incident, she always clean up now. So
you signed her up. That's great.
So sometimes, it's unfortunate, you have to take that situation. But I approached her many times before. I don't know what happened that day. And explain to her, we need, you need to help. And and even one time we excused her from helping because she had a a friend who died, and but it's just that you know. But the good news is, from that moment onwards, she always helped now. So
That's great. This brings up one
Thanks
more
for
thing I want to share.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing the
yeah.
good
So sometimes
Carol
out of every bad incident, you know, sometimes there a good comes out of it. So
Yeah.
Thank you, love.
I was thinking that it could be an opportunity also to like sit down with the group at a point, you know, after kind of a conflict has calmed down a little bit, or with some space as a group, to just name. So if these kinds of things show up, if a conflict shows up like this, where we're, you know, there's a lot of feeling, how do we want to negotiate it as a group? Do we want to just say, we'll just take a pause? Let's just always agree we're going to take a pause, and then we'll always come back to it, because we really value everyone's participation in the circle. And then I think that's a really awesome opportunity, once we get into the transformative justice training, to build in some practices that are part of the way your group works together. That's like, if conflict happens, this is what we'll do. If you feel pushed out of your window of tolerance because of a way that something is said or a particular word, this is how you would prefer that I work with you. Noted, I'll do my best. These kinds of agreements that it'll still get messy. Anyone who's been organizing for a good long time knows it's gonna get messy. There will be conflict in there. Any other questions from the group?
Maybe we could prompt anyone from Mutual Aid Parkdale, because that wound up being a great example from the women's leadership group and the wellness drop-in. So back pre-pandemic times. Curious though if there are any from the current context of organizing taking place that folks would want to share. And thank you again also for Bella and Opal and Naty for working that all through together. That was awesome. I'll leave a little space. I'll also just indicate in the chat, there are some great visions already being created around potential crisis navigation teams, et cetera. Lee, I see you volunteering, so please go ahead.
Am I unmuted? Okay. I have many examples and I don't know which one to use, but I think probably one of the easiest ones to use is like, usually when I'm trying to so many things have happened in my neighborhood, like just seeing someone out in the middle of traffic that is like heavily refusing to have help or to get off the road, that kind of stuff. So I've navigated doing that with neighbors, and this was at Queen and Dufferin, so it was a very busy intersection that someone was in the middle of. But I think the most common thing I see the most is, it's not even people new to the neighborhood. I know Naty described it as NIMBYism, but I think a lot of times it's like people just see the encampments, or they see syringes around, or they see whatever they see, and then they just say, oh, I really don't want my children to see that, and I just don't want to be around that. I think we should just we have to move away from it. We have to move to Hamilton. Let's go to the suburbs, whatever. I know there's just as many or more people in Parkdale that are like, I'm gonna dig in further. Parkdale is awesome. And you know, the fact that we help so many people and we have so many people like that in our neighborhood actually makes it super special and different. But there's a lot of people in the surrounding communities, which are really quickly coming into Parkdale too, that don't think like that, and they're not used to seeing any of that, and they just are super judgy about it. So I think the biggest thing is the agitators, or the people, for me, like in a typical normal, for me, a normal Thursday afternoon in Parkdale, walking down the street with maybe like a yelling match happening between some people in front of the liquor store or whatever, is like other bystanders are taking videos. They're thinking it's funny, or maybe they're going to post it. or they're going to send it to their friends, or maybe they're doing it for police purposes, or I don't know what they're doing it for. But that kind of stuff like is most what bothers me, the kind of like ignorance and how to like how to handle those people when you're in a situation, I think is the hardest thing. Or like how to prevent a situation from happening by talking to the bystanders. I think, yeah, because most likely people stay away from going to intervene in the crisis, I've seen, and there's more people that are agitating a crisis. So I have more issues with how do I talk to the agitators? Help me, help me. I need so much help with that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, there's a lot in there. I took some serious notes. Okay, where to begin? Okay, so I mean, I think campaign work, whatever that means, or relationship building through, I'm going to say campaign in the broadest sense, posters, community events and talks, connecting with groups like Encampment Support Network, of course. And like, I keep saying these things and I'm like, you guys are probably already doing this, but centering the voices of folks who are most impacted in town halls and community talks, and continuing to build relationship with folks who are maybe on the fencers. So organizing with folks who are like, yeah, we're aligned. Identifying folks on the fence, businesses, neighbors, etc. Okay, who's going to work on those folks? Wherever you can work on direct relationships, the better. Knowing that if you plant a strong seed in their mind, which is, you may or may not agree that the police cause harm, but I'm letting you know that in our community, a large portion of our community believes and knows they do cause harm. Anytime you want to talk about that right now, I can share all the ways that they cause harm. And we love our community so much. We're doing things different. And you've probably seen, we can organize like it's nobody's business, and that's what we're doing. And if you live here, here's your opportunity to sign up, okay? And then you can identify, okay, we're gonna be having this town hall, we're gonna be doing this workshop. Of course, that sounds really nice. I know that a lot of people will totally resist that. I know that a lot of people absolutely believe that police are very appropriate. They're the only people who should deal with drunk people, someone who's wilding out, someone who's in the street, and that those people do deserve to be criminalized. And that, of course, also I would say is deep consciousness and education work in our communities has to keep going nonstop, not just in this moment where all of a sudden it's a mainstream conversation, defund the police, which has to mean, what's the alternative? We have to build it ourselves. Wait, we are, let's lift it up. So, yep, that work nonstop. I think where you feel like you can step in and identify that a person's being harmful. So if they're filming some people, they're talking about someone, they're laughing, wherever you feel possible, because that to me is a crisis that needs intervention as well. Maybe that's actually more dangerous and harmful than the person who's, screaming out front the LCBO, telling a funny joke, who knows? So you might use the same strategies of crisis navigation with that person, which, yeah, again, probably has more power to leverage anyway, to approach them, check in with them. Granted, you're probably just using a firm, compassionate voice relaying, the thing you're doing is actually quite harmful. I'd love to explain to you why. I'd love to invite you to move away from this area. I'd love to let you know that our community is practicing strategies for caring for ourselves. And if you are not inclined to participate, you definitely are getting in the way. So let it be known. We're watching you. I guess that's a threat.
That's a good one.
I see you.
I like it.
Those are some things that come to mind.
I'm here with you.
And then I do want to say, in terms of a person in the middle of the street, that's okay. Totally an example where there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk. You can do what you can to try and reach that person. You can do what you can. I generally, again, would say, don't do that by yourself. Have a crew of people. I actually would stop traffic. I would, with a group of people, stop traffic and try and support that person to leave the street. But I know that's not always possible. During rush hour, that probably is incredibly daunting. But no doubt those cars see that person in the street also. So it could even just be an opportunity to be like, everybody, this is a human in the street. We should be stopping our cars. We're all involved in this crisis, actually, this moment. We shouldn't be zooming past. Let's all pause, actually, and support this person back to a safer space. If after, making efforts to create a buffer around that person, encourage them to move to a safer space, reminding them, you can totally scream. Let's just go to the park. Let's get a cigarette. Let's go to the park. Scream your head off. I totally support that. You can be naked. I mean, maybe not naked, but not wearing much clothes and no shoes. I'm okay with that. Not in the street. It's dangerous for you and everyone. Reiterating. And if you're not able to get that person to leave the street, that unfortunately, if someone may call the police, someone likely will call the police. So I would say that is an instance where having people with next level professional conflict negotiation and crisis navigation skills, who perhaps also have the capacity to move a person, you could call them in, but that is risky and dangerous, but it's already a risky and dangerous situation. But again, that requires like serious skills, probably a certain size, strength, all of those kinds of things. But, when you refer back to your pod mapping, make sure you've got, one of those people with good politics. And I just say that because security guards and bouncers can also be part of the system that harms and criminalizes and throws out bars and bans and beats up our community members. I'm just going to say, I feel like my trans sisters and brothers and gender nonconforming fabulous peoples, they experience so much violence from security guards and bouncers. Anyway, that's another conversation. That's the next workshop series. I don't know if that helps.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you, Lee. So we have about 10-ish minutes left. We have 2 people who've indicated they want to ask questions. So I'm not sure if we can try to pack it all in. And we have a couple questions in the chat, like what does it look like to create a safety plan on a neighborhood-wide scale? So that's a great question. But Shah, I'm going to invite you in to ask a question.
Thank you, Mercedes. Greetings, everyone, 2021. So nice to see you, Naty. I'm so happy to see you today. I want to thank Berlin for sharing and Teresa for being here, and Cole, thank you for connecting with me throughout this pandemic. It's been really lovely to receive your messages. So one of the things I've been focusing on personally is I do live in a housing co-op in Parkdale, and we have been experiencing on a micro level many of the things that have been shared today on a more neighborhood scale. And so we find ourselves, I think, in communities, as we spoke of earlier, with regards to living in apartment buildings or smaller shared spaces, where the quarantine, mental health, and many other crises have come forth a lot more illuminated than in the past. And so in my particular home, we've had some incidences that are very difficult to pinpoint. And so in our housing co-op, we're particularly blessed where we, myself and another housing member, have initiated a mediation situation. And from my past history with community building and peace and nonviolence practices, we've invited St. Stephen's in to assist us with this mediation as an outside, unbiased, trained agency who've helped us in the past. Now, as a person living in this home, and thank you, Lee, for bringing up agitators and how to deal with that. And thank you, Naty, for your guidance on how to deal with that, because that is sometimes one of the biggest challenges with dealing with crisis, especially in a home situation where they're not your family. They're others' families. So I was actually just interested. I'm grateful that the PowerPoint will be shared, because I've been taking pictures of the screens, mostly because all of this information is going to be extremely beneficial as I share it with the Dufferin Grove Housing Co-op. We're planning to build a member relations committee to assist our community in developing better practices in our community to assist each other, especially during the pandemic, especially during the confined spaces that we're in, trying to maintain a cooperative governance and practices without losing our minds on everyone. And so I wanted to know, are there any other community organizations that I could be, developing as part of our safety plan with our house as well as our co-op that maybe are different than St. Stephen's with regards to mediation, conflict resolution, crisis intervention. This might also help the rest of us here as we develop safety plans and pods. And the other thing is, I'm finding it, and I really do appreciate you in so many ways, especially for your voice. And I've been finding it difficult to find my voice as a racialized woman speaking up about this personal problem, because I am the only one woman of color as a single mother living in this house. And it did actually get brought up in my intake that was definitely something to be taken into consideration with regards to mediation, because I've been feeling very disempowered to speak up about these strange, violent actions and behaviors. So do you have anything to share with us with regards to agencies? And maybe share with us a little bit of your medicine and magic with how do you share your voice?
Well, first I want to say thank you for sharing that scenario and also sharing about how it's been impacting me personally. Yeah, thanks for the courage to share that with us. Because it's particular when it's in your home. That's a whole other level of complex crisis to navigate. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that that's happening. And conversely, I'm really glad to hear that you're organizing. Not surprised. And I love that you've already initiated some mediation, that you're initiating a members relations committee. I would love to hear more about that. That's awesome. I feel like something like a member relations committee would be in fact a space that centers your voice and that centers your leadership. If it's a truly intersectional, politically aware member relations committee. But I recognize that nonetheless, even when groups, people are like, yeah, we're invested in centering the voices of the folks who are least represented here, that might mean that they, invite you to share a small piece, or maybe it's a little presentation, or maybe it's, we've talked at you and now you can tell us what you think, ... Anyway, I think some orgs that you can tap in. I mean, I wish that I could say there's tons. I really wish that I could say that. And in particular, because there are folks who do mediation, but it's very much from a kind of more of a business, kind of like you write what you want, I write what we want, and we negotiate between those terms, unfortunately. So I could name Rittenhouse, where I work, which specifically does transformative justice work. And so we use transformative justice models, so circles, conferencing, to work through conflict and crisis. And I mean, a circle is also a great way to be heard and get your voice lifted, because there's no hierarchy in the circle. And I do want to say, the ideal is actually that we don't have to rely on orgs or not-for-profits either. Because I truly believe we can definitely learn transformative justice skills. Anybody can do it. And I just say that because as there's big conversation about transformative justice and mutual aid and for mental health first aid, there can be this push to let's go to those agencies that are doing that work. And let's get that government money and the police funding and we'll give it to them. And social workers can cause a lot of harm too. And those big institutions can cause a lot of harm too. The biggest harm is that it replicates this colonial belief that communities can't deal with conflict and crisis on their own. That we don't have those tools, that we need someone with a law degree to do it for us. When we've been doing it for thousands of years, and that colonized people have nurtured those things despite it being outlawed. Circle keeping as an example. So I just say that because I would totes be down to connect you to folks in your community who already do circle keeping. And that's one thing Rittenhouse can do, is connect you to circle keepers or facilitators, and also consult or partner you with a mentor who can help you do that, because I think you could be the circle keeper.
Oh, Naty, I was hoping you would say that. So I will be contacting you. Thank you so much.
I will, though, shout out Peace Builders, though they mostly work with high school age students. TPRP, the Toronto Prisoner Rights Project, they've been working on #We Keep Each Other Safe, a whole host of workshops, We just wrote a grant actually with them, and I know we're gonna get it. And actually, if we all just like cross our fingers together right now, may we get that funding so we can roll out free training in transformative justice all spring and summer. Woo! Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. Spellcasting. And then there's a lot of like ad hoc groups. And actually, I wonder if even in your neighborhood, there is currently a kind of a neighborhood, I know they have different names, but like, it's like they're on Signal or on WhatsApp and they're like, okay, what do we need now? I don't know what to call them, but it's a beautiful thing. That's like, okay, who is a circle keeper? Who can mediate? That's just in our neighborhood. And I just want to lift up those folks who are, I know there's a group in Bloordale Village. Yeah, anyway, those are some of the things that surface. And then I think that's an area for us to organize and build totally as we develop our safety plans and our support pods. Who in our community has circle keeping skills? Who in our community? And I just want to say a circle is not one circle, it's many circles. Every circle surfaces information. It gives the space for people to speak. You might not be ready the first circle to share what you need to share. Because a conflict and a crisis is like a knot of many threads. If you pull on one thread, it usually, I don't know if anyone knits up in here, it usually just like tightens the ball. It makes it just a nasty, tight mess. You got to kind of like do this. And
Yeah.
right? And make space for nuance in there. So many circles. Anyway, so holler at me, Michelle. All that to say, holler at me.
Give thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And maybe I'll just quickly note, there were a couple extra questions about like tenant intervention crisis and a number of ones, but I'm also noticing we're like minutes away from the end. I'm not sure if we want to like smush in one last question, or if we want to, maybe we could send you questions that do continue to generate, Naty. Totally. And if you're open to continuing this process, and Naty will be rejoining us at a future date to talk more deeply about what transformative justice looks like. So maybe that will be the better space, just because we've been going for a long time. I know Naty's been going since about 10 a.m. today. A lot of us have been going since first thing in the morning. So probably need a bit of a rest and a bit of a break. But does that sound okay to folks if we move into the next steps? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay. Beautiful. So, oh my gosh, thank you again. We've learned so much through this session. And I am just going to go back to sharing screen just so we can follow up on a couple big next step pieces. So just pause with me for 1 second, also as we get these tech pieces up, and I hope you can all see these slides now as they're being shared. And I'm going to try my best to go through the slides and post links. I'm curious, Beryl, did you want to say a little tiny word about how to get involved with Mutual Aid Parkdale?
Sure, there's some of us here that belong to Mutual Aid Parkdale, such as Lee, myself, and I'm thinking, how could you join us? You could reach out to me, actually. So you can reach out to me. I work at Parkdale People Economy, so you could reach out to me, send me an email, or my phone number is when you register, my phone number there is 2. You could call me at 416-803-9594, and I'll share with you how you could get involved. Thanks, Ms. Louise.
Thank you so much, Beryl. Yeah, and once again, we're continuing always to look for folks to join pods or to become pod leaders, or just simply to continue the work in spirit. So we also put a link in the chat to the website where you can find a couple of the resources that are being shared through the Mutual Aid Network. We'll keep on moving. As we've mentioned a lot, we've talked a lot about alternatives to policing, and there's also quite a bit of organizing happening around defunding the police as one of those strategies towards abolition. And so I'm going to also share this campaign that Standing Up for Racial Justice is putting on. As you can see here, this specific target is at Gord Perks, but they're doing a citywide campaign in all wards, trying to really encourage counselors to sign on to supporting the efforts to defund the police in the upcoming budgeting workshop or budgeting consultations that are coming up. So yeah, once again, in the chat, we have added the link there. Gonna keep us moving to talk about more calls to action. So there's a historic declaration currently circulating around divesting from policings and prisons and opportunities to build safer communities. This especially has been shared to us by the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project, but of course, many other fantastic groups have signed on to this. So sharing this here. I have a couple more announcements, but I see Opal raising her hand. So Opal, please, do you have something to add?
Just one quick question, love. In terms of the city councilors, we need to know which ones are on board with defund the police so that we can support those councilors, even though they're not in our area, if they're going for the defund the police campaign. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Opal. Maybe I'll encourage people, if anyone in the chat has a sense of those sympathetic counselors and where we might have some potential leverage, please do add those into the chat. We should say we have tried to place some pressure on Gord Perks. So of course, in Parkdale, continued efforts there. Marilyn, I hear you sharing. Go ahead. Oh, did you want to add? No? Okay. My apologies. Another reminder that we have more workshops coming. So at the very beginning of today's workshop, we did share the full workshop series. We can repost that, but very specifically, we want to welcome you all to next Monday's workshop, which is around mental health and wellness. So we've posted the registration link here in the chat. And if you go to the Parkdale People's Economy page, you can see all of our other workshops that are currently being organized. And so our next one in the following week is around harm reduction, and we're just waiting to get the full finalized list of confirmed facilitators for us to put out the RSVP links for the next set. So please keep your eyes posted there. I'm going to share in the chat. We would really love if you can provide your feedback on these sessions as they're moving, so we know how to continue to shape any future workshops or opportunities for discussion around these areas. So I'm posting that form in the chat. We can reshare it one more time. And I'm going to pass on, if it's okay, to Teresa to share a little bit about an upcoming community coalition meeting. And Teresa.
Thanks very much. Just finding the unmute button. I'm sure a lot of people on the call are aware of what happened at 1521 Queens Hotel back in 2015. There was a mass unlawful eviction of 27 rooming house tenants. As a result, a couple of those tenants actually lost their lives. One of them also lost their legs in the subsequent eviction. And so now we're in 2021, these developers that are called Bazaar Development, they are now asking the city permission to bulldoze this building and build in its place an 8-story luxury rental building. And so we as a community are getting together. We have formed the Community Justice for Queens Hotel Coalition. Some of the coalition members are on the call today. We're excited to invite you all to a community coalition meeting happening next Thursday, February the 11th. I'm going to put the link into the chat box as well if anyone would like to find out and join us. This is going to be an opportunity for us to understand what's happening with this development and also how we as a community can respond to it. So please do see that link in the chat box. I also will add that there is a mutual aid meeting that is happening this coming Monday at 10 a.m. around defunding the police, where we're going to learn more information about who the counselors are in support. I'm going to link that as well, the Facebook page for that event, into the chat box so everyone can find out. And Opal, there should be more information to your question at that meeting. So this coming Monday, February 8th at 10 a.m. and I'll link that in the chat box. Thanks, Mercedes.
Thank you so much.
And
also,
we need to be looking for more social justice attorneys. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Opal. Okay, and so I can see Teresa is currently adding some of the pieces to the chat. So please look there. And what we'll do now is just a big thanks if folks can just unmute themselves and say their good nights. And remember, once again, we'll leave this open a little bit so people can get all the links as they're coming in. But just once again, huge thank you to Naty. Huge thank you to the co-hosts and all the organizers who put on this call tonight, and to everyone who's joined tonight. Just huge thanks. So please unmute and say good nights.
Good night. Good thanks.
Good night. Thanks. Good night.
You're welcome.
Thank
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Yes.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
It was a great
Thank
presentation.
you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Please
Thank
check
you.
your question so we can bring it forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much, Naty. Thank you, Mercedes.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you.
everyone. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Oh,
Thank you,
Rose.
Berlin.
Oh,
Thank you, Berlin. Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you, Rose.
And thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We're
to
so
you.
glad
will
it
be
worked out for
good.
you, Rose.
Thanks to the what's her name again?
Naty.
Naty.
You're welcome. My
Thank you for
pleasure.
that good lecture.
Thanks for saying. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yep.
Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, I'm gonna try to stop recording.